But it turns out the U.S. government has finally given up any pretense of actually caring about the Kurds or any oppressed minority group in the Middle East. We have now revealed our real plan: protect the oil. So, this is according to an article I've seen in USA Today. The Pentagon is preparing to send tanks and armored vehicles to Syria. Again, not to protect the Kurds, because, look, we already have now a ceasefire between the Kurds and Turkish forces in the area. No, what we're doing is that we're sending it to protect the oil fields in Syria. In fact, quote, this is according to a U.S. official: the deployment of heavy armor to Syria would represent a significant escalation in the fight. Sorry, that's not a quote. Requiring a contingent of additional troops to operate and maintain those vehicles, as well as forces to protect their bases, according to the USA Today. So now the deployment of, on Friday, Defense Secretary Mark Esper had confirmed in remarks in Brussels that the Pentagon is planning to send these armored vehicles, tanks, to protect oil fields from ISIS. Now, that, of course, is not true. ISIS has been mainly destroyed in that area. They're not going to sit there and hold the oil fields. No, in reality, they're actually going to hold it from the Russians, as well as the Kurds, as well as anyone else. So now, here's the thing, right? So now, earlier this week, Trump went out and said, we're finally, leaving the Middle East. Let them fight over the sand, right? No, that was never the plan. Remember, the troops weren't actually ever getting pulled out of Syria. Yes, they were pulled out of northern Syria. They were redeployed to Iraq, right? Or in different places in central and southern Syria, right? The reason that we moved is that you had this call between President Erdogan of Turkey and President Trump, after which suddenly Trump says, let's just going to pull out of everywhere, right? So we're just going to get out of the way of the way of the Turks. We're going to let them come in and take these areas. We don't care about them anyway. We don't care about the Kurds. We don't care about this. Oh, they're just fighting over sand anyway, as Donald Trump says. Now, in reality, no, it's not sand. No, the thing is that we pulled out and we basically gave the green light to the Turks to do ethnic cleansing in the area. And that has happened before. There's a little something called the Armenian genocide that happened in that same area where the Turks went in and did ethnic cleansing. And so here's what we have going on there. So now, of course, all they care about, the Trump administration does, is getting access to the oil. In fact, Esper says, quote, we want to make sure that they don't have access to the resources that may allow them to strike within the region, to strike Europe, to strike the United States. And he's still talking about ISIS as if that's like a thing, right? Like, basically, Esper is trying to gaslight us into saying, oh, look, we got ISIS in the area, so we're going to have to, and this is after, of course, Trump says, we completely annihilated and destroyed ISIS. It does not exist anymore. Well, what happened to the victory? Why are we sending more tanks? Of course, we're going to protect the oil. It's all about getting access to the oil, as we knew. So now, here's the thing, right? Before, and if I understand the situation correctly, before Trump removed our forces from northern Syria, we had the Kurds that were protecting the oil fields, right? Now, we left, again, giving the Turks a green light to do the ethnic cleansing, and then we come back into the area after that's over with, after we let the Turks do whatever they wanted to do. There's now a ceasefire in place, but now we come back to that area because we're going to protect the oil fields. So now what happens here is at first we just twisted the knife in the back of the Kurds. And make no mistake about it. We get out of there, we let the Turks do their thing, then we come back and we say, well, we were here to protect the oil the whole time. That's the message that we send, right? The Republicans never cared about the Kurds. In fact, yesterday, a Republican politician going and saying, hey, look, man, if they're going to do ethnic cleansing, if they're going to do it anyway, it's better that we just get out of the way and just let them do it. That was John Cornyn, by the way. And Trump, again, said, we're just going to let them fight it out over the sand. You idiot. It's not sand. It proves that Trump knows nothing. The area is actually part of the Fertile Crescent. It's actually great farmland. It's where agriculture literally began in the world. But Trump calls it sand, but then, of course, he's distracted by the fact that there's oil. So now, of course, we have conflicting messages from President Trump. In fact, he had said, quote, "I'm trying to get out of wars. We may have to get in wars too." This was during a cabinet meeting on Monday. Okay, so we have to get out, but then we have to get in. That doesn't make any sense. And yet, Thursday, the Pentagon says we're going to significantly escalate our presence in the region. Why? I think it's because somebody told them about the oil. Oh, there's oil there? Oh, there's oil. Oh, we're going to have to go and take the oil. In fact, he said that before. He said if we're going to go into a country, if we're going to go into the Middle East, well, then we might as well take the oil while we're there. Even though I don't want to go in the first place, if we're going to go in, take the oil. It's not even our oil, by the way. It's technically Syrian oil, but Donald Trump doesn't care. If he sees oil there, he says, "Oh, my buddies in the oil industry, they're going to love this yummy oil. Go get them." So now Seth Jones, a national security expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, he saw this and he's like, "This is very, very confusing U.S. policy." Well, look, I'm going to have to push back on that. It's not at all confusing. All you have to do is look at it in the context of U.S. foreign policy and what it has been for the last 30, 40 years. It's the oil, at least when it comes to the Middle East, right? And no, not just when you look at the Middle East. For example, look at North Korea, right? We've never invaded North Korea. We allowed them to get nuclear weapons. We allowed them to do massive human rights abuses. Why? North Korea doesn't have oil. Same in any other place where there's massive human rights abuses. But when it comes to every country that has oil, suddenly America's got to swoop in and say, "Oh, we're just gonna end these human rights abuses and bring democracy to the region." No, it's about the oil. It's always been about the oil. And when you see it from that context, you'll see that Donald Trump's foreign policy strategy makes all the sense in the world, because he didn't know, he was ignorant of that part of the country actually having oil and not being just sand. And now that he knows, he's like, "Oh, get back in there, get back in there. We got to escalate. We got to escalate. We got to make sure nobody else but our corporations get the oil." Because again, originally he's such a racist that he thought, why not let the Kurds and Turks fight over it? They're both Arabs. They're both fighting over sand. Again, he knows nothing. It's not sand. They're not Arabs. But he leaves. The Turks come in. The Kurds leave. And now, interestingly enough, the Russians and the Turks are in the area that was once controlled by our allies, the Kurds. They controlled the area. They patrolled it along with U.S. patrols, and they controlled the oil fields. And we leave. Russia and the Turks come in because they have been working together much more closely now, as of late. They have access to the area where the oil is. And now our troops are being sent in to stop Russia from getting the oil. It's about our corporations, not about ISIS, but it's about our corporations versus the Russian corporations having access to that oil. It's all about profit. I'm going to go here to a quote from Nicholas Harris. He's an expert on Syria with the Center for a New American Security. He said, quote, this, "Pure and simple. The Pentagon is making contingencies for a big fight with Russia for Syria's oil." It's true. It's all about the oil. It's always been about the oil. And it's another reason we need to get away from fossil fuels, because it's basically what right now, the only thing that drives our foreign policy. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.